All right, good afternoon, everybody. How you guys feeling today? You all right? Uh, why are we here? We're here to discuss the necessary topic of affordable living for artists in Miami. Goes without saying that any city without makers is full of consumers, and any city with only consumers in it, it's not necessarily a place where artists have the opportunity to live above a sustenance level, right? I think all of our objectives as makers is to do a little bit more than to sustain or a little bit more than maintain and pay our bills. I think that's like the universal worldwide artist story, right? You make enough to get by and you live through the beauty of your art or through whatever commerce your art brings you. So we're here to discuss that. And my name is Rich Medina. I am co-owner and music director at Dante's Hi-Fi right here in Wynwood. And hey, thanks. I like that. Hey, thanks a lot. Shit. I gotta start saying that more often. Lucky me, I have these three esteemed young ladies on the panel with me today. And we have Avra Jain, co-founder of the Vagabond Group. Audrey Ardanas, Deputy Director of Miami Homes for All. And Lori Merites, did I say it correctly? Lori Merites, Executive Director of Locust Projects. So, again, we're here to discuss the universal issue of how can an artist who is working as an independent find the type of living situation where it's affordable and it affords you the space and the opportunity to do what you need to do creatively to get ahead. A great deal of us spend a lot of time keeping up. I think all of us want to get ahead at a certain point. And I believe these ladies have some vocabulary for us coming from the executive side of things and from the land ownership side of things that's going to be very interesting for us to understand. So I'd like to have each of the ladies introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Audrey. I'm with Miami Homes for All. We are a nonprofit advocacy organization focusing on increasing affordable housing and ending homelessness here in Greater Miami. We've been doing this work since 1985. And, you know, when I think about the art space and living here in Miami, nobody can afford to live here. You know, my sister is an artist, and she's living with her partner and in deep Kendall. Uh, and so she has to Uber or Lyft or take a bunch of different buses just to be able to participate in the various activities here, right? And so this issue is crucial not only as an advocacy organization, but for all of us, because how do we thrive here without art and culture? If we lose all of that, and I'm not going to talk about what's going on at the state and all that, but as we lose a lot and we are devaluing arts and culture, what does that mean for us as a society? And so for us, my perspective on this whole issue is how do we invest in affordable housing so that way our artists, our culture, our entrepreneurs can thrive here.
Hi, my name is Avra Jain. I'm with the Vagabond Group, probably known for a lot of the motel renovations on Biscayne Boulevard, which includes the Vagabond Hotel. I'm also partners with David and Coloma and all them for Factory Town. So, and have had really the privilege of working with a lot of artists. I also sit on the Locust board with Lori. A lot of my friends are artists. There's no doubt that I think the focus for affordable housing, whether it's artists or underserved communities in general, is how do we preserve culture and context. My projects, I have one in Overtown, in the Omni CRA area. It's really a historic preservation project. And the goal of that project was to keep the residents there. It took grants, it took subsidies, It took a lot of private investment on our part to do that. The issue, and it's important just to put it out there so everybody can understand, the problem with affordable housing is it's too expensive. The cost to build is greater than. If you gave me a free piece of land, I couldn't build you 80%, I couldn't build you $1,500 studios, not to mention $1,000 studios, with free land, just because of the cost of construction. And that's like taking no profits. So the issue with affordable housing really is who's writing the check? And so there's the public side, lots of smokes and mirrors, lots of, Audrey deals with this on a regular basis. And then on the private side, who's stepping up? And so I can say that thankfully myself and my team have done it. I'm working with David and Coloma and Davida on a solution for artists right now. But again, it's about subsidizing and finding innovative ways to pay the cost. But the thing is that we can't afford not to do it. So how do we get the public and private side to do their part?
Big questions. Lori Mertes, I'm the executive director of Locust Projects. How many are familiar with what Locust is? Good handful. So, handful not. So we are founded by artists for artists in 1998 in Wynwood. We're in our fourth home. We've been rent vulnerable as we come in and gentrification follows, the rents rise, and we've been pushed out. So even as an arts organization who has, received nonprofit status in 2001, has a professional board, wonderful board members like Avra, we're still vulnerable to the same issues that artists are facing. And while we're a visual arts organization that helps artists to dream big, create ambitious, large-scale, site-specific installations, we give them the time, the space, and the resources to do so in a way that galleries and museums won't. They won't let you take a jackhammer to the floors and dig 2 feet deep and 30 foot wide. They won't let you put in above ground swimming pools and do synchronized swimming necessarily. So we're doing the things, we're a laboratory, a space for artists to experiment and push their practice. And one of the things that's really key with Locust is we're not just about visual arts, is a lot of our projects involve multidisciplinary. And so, and almost everyone who works with us, whether they're a photographer, videographer, the AV person, they're all artists of different disciplines. And so we really have a sense of what's going on and what artists are facing. Also, we have a program that's called Legal Art Link, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but we offer free legal services, advice, referrals, pro bono, completely free to artists of all disciplines. And so during COVID, when evictions were happening, not just in studios, but in homes, we were there to help. So that's one of the things we can talk about. But just to kind of introduce, Locust is a space that has been around for 27 years, remains vulnerable to these issues, and talking about, what are those private spaces, even corporate. We're in a city that has people coming in droves from New York, corporations settling here. Why? Because we have fantastic arts and culture. And so we should be figuring out how to monetize that within that sector to really sustain the amazing city that we have for the arts.
It brings up a really interesting question that I think all of us wonder at times at whatever tier of thinking about it we are, and that's what role can artists play in the revitalization of certain areas in the city and how to avoid displacement, because the general perspective is we're here and this is cool and we're able to afford it and we're having a great time and I'm surrounded by other people who are of a creative mind, and here come the developers and we're getting gentrified, and what the fuck are we going to do now? It's the fundamental question. I think the dilemma that hangs over the vast majority of artists is a lack of civic engagement. Who do you know in the civic side of the vocabulary that you can address? And praise God, we have these ladies here to share their perspective with us from that side. So how can artists engage in the revitalization process without being displaced?
I'll just jump in on the very first thing. It's voting. Voting is one of the very first things you can do. And after that, you make your voice heard to the elected officials who are in office. There are advocacy, Florida Cultural Alliance, Americans for the Arts is a national organization that is an advocate for artists and has, Florida has an advocacy website that anyone can access. We're all part of the voting public and we do have a voice. And so, it makes a difference even on the local level. Our city and our county officials need to know, and we're hearing this from our dear supporters and champions in the county, the Department of Cultural Affairs. I was just in a meeting on Monday talking about how these commissioners, when they're deciding where to allocate dollars, need to know what's important to this community. They need to be hearing it. And if they don't, they hear from the loudest squeaky wheel.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then lots of times it's like, what can you do for yourselves, right? So my experience in the public-private world is if you can get something started, past an idea, it's easier then to get funding. So in our case, or something that probably you guys do as well, right? You gotta get the site first, right? And then once you have control of the site, now maybe as a group you can go to your friends, let's draw something, let's do something, let's put something together. So you have something to raise for. The artists that become successful, I always encourage them, hey, buy a duplex and make sure that you're giving the other half of the duplex to the people that need the help one day when you needed the help, right? So lots of times it's like, what can we do for ourselves? I've spoken to arts organizations, people that are placemakers, right? So, where does Oh Miami go? Where does, whether it's Fountainhead or anybody, right? So artists help create neighborhoods. So artists need to, and they know that now, right? We've seen it over and over again in every city. That is not new. So I always try to encourage artists, like, hey, get together, like, buy a house, right? I helped Carlos Bentoncourt get his studio in his piece of land in Little River because I was one of the earlier adopters there, and I was like, Carlos, you gotta buy a piece of land now, right? And then one day build your house, right? So, when you guys are together, think about how you can do that, and sometimes it can be pulling money together. People call me up all the time, and find a warehouse, and then figure it out. So there's things the more you can do for yourself to kickstart an idea, it's easier to raise money and get, I'd say collective support around it. So that's from the developer side, that's just a suggestion.
I totally agree with Avra and Lori here, because when we think about existing models and how we preserve our local stock of affordable housing, we can have programs like community land trusts or housing co-ops where artists can come together, and we're seeing some of that actually happen right now. Dade Heritage Trust just renovated a property, a house, where artists can live at an affordable rate. I think their rent is about $1,200, which I know doesn't sound that affordable, but given the where we are right now, it's pretty affordable compared to other units, right? And so there are models that we can look to from other communities as well, right? And I also want to encourage us to think about, as Avra mentioned, what ideas can we pursue in terms of looking at the available land or buildings that we have, which I know is quite expensive, but looking at that and seeing how can we build on top or reconfigure a current property to better suit residents. So right now, Miami Homes for All, we are working with a pipeline, so 15 different projects across Allapattah, Overtown, Liberty City, Little Haiti, North Miami, Brownsville. And in those communities, what we did was we partnered up with a local developer as well as a nonprofit to identify community needs and identify land, and we now have site control. So now we recently bought those land in those areas, and are starting to build based on what the community is telling us. So it's really important, as Lori has mentioned, that civic engagement piece of being involved in your local community and with local organizations. So, for example, one of the projects that we're working with is Miami Worker Center in Little Haiti, right? And so, identifying, what the community needs in that area, they said we don't want a skyscraper, we want a duplex or a building with only 4 units. And we were like, okay, let's do this. But then the challenge becomes bureaucracy, right? And trying to figure out what the gaps, permitting issues, coding issues, all that stuff. And so I think that's another piece where I think artists and creatives can come in identifying pain points and going in front of elected officials or other stakeholders and say, hey, this project, I heard this project was trying to be built 2 years ago. Nothing has happened yet. How, what can you, city official, county official, do to expedite this process? So I think it's, everything that Avra and Lori have shared already.
And from the artist side of that conversation, it's important to remember that these days, most of us do all of our research and all of our finding out of things through an instrument. And we're alone when we do it. And we're thinking about how we individually can fall into a place of opportunity. But from everything that you're hearing here, there's a lost art of community economics and what would be called ujima in African culture, which is a painter and a builder and another visual artist and another artist of some sort can see beyond the dollar sign that comes for the next piece that you make and begin to combine forces with other people who are going through the same thing, even if they might be in your medium, in another medium, it doesn't matter. But there is indeed strength in numbers. And when you go to city officials and boards as an individual, you sound kind of far off in the distance. But if you come 10 deep and everybody in that group is on the same page, even if there's one spokesperson for you, there's avenues there. But without that diligence from our side as artists, it's a dream. And we're stuck in a gentrification loop forever. And I think it's really important for us to recognize some responsibility in stepping forward in this situation. And it brings me to the next question of what are some of the operating models of what we're discussing that are alive in Miami today?
I mean, I can talk just from the arts organizations that are getting in. I know you have, both of you have far more deep knowledge, but there is a movement afoot with some of the arts organizations. Bakehouse Art Complex, which has been around since 1986. It's really primarily artist studio space. They actually smartly own their real estate. It's about a city block. It's in Wynwood. It's almost on the edge of I-95 off of 5th in the 34th. And they are partnering with developers and working on rezoning to be able to build affordable housing as part of their $40 million assessment on this old building that just really wasn't taken care of. And Avra knows a bit about that project as well. But right next to them on North Miami Avenue, there's a new affordable housing space that was built that they did some art in public places working with Bakehouse. Oolite Arts, which is going to be building a building in Little Haiti, Little River, which I guess is moving forward in a couple years out, but they're currently on Miami Beach, and they have, through support of another developer, they have an apartment complex that they have an open call for artists to live in rent subsidized housing. I think they're charging $600 a month for rent and work space close to Oolite, but you have some agreements that you have to work with them. This is primarily visual arts, but they also say that they open it up to people outside of Miami, which I think Miami artists need to get in on it first. And then there's a lot of national programs too that really haven't made their way here. Art Space is one that really was founded in Minneapolis that's now in 22 cities. It's in Fort Lauderdale. I didn't know that they had done something, but they primarily, like Avra, work on preservation of spaces that are, which in this space is hard and expensive to do. But they were arts advocates. This is what I think, to your point, Rich, of getting together and pooling your resources. These were arts advocates who were out there doing the work and doing the fight in the 70s and realized they weren't getting anywhere, and they became developers. They saw an opportunity, and then they now are the biggest advocates for affordable live workspace. And I do want to say, I also just needed to educate myself on what affordable housing and how you qualify. Do you want to talk about, because you talked about, you were about to say the 80%. Maybe explain what that means and how you actually get access to affordable housing. And just to finish, on Miami Beach, the ballet is, and above the ballet, or behind the ballet parking lot that's being built, there's another unit. So there's a bit of this arts live workspace kind of thing happening. Well, yes? Could you repeat the name of those first two organizations? Art Space in Minneapolis, Oolite Arts. Oolite Arts is founded, it's 40 years, turning 40 years old this year. Founded by art, this is again, to Rich's point about get together. In the 80s, Lincoln Road was empty. There were empty storefronts, and artists basically wanted space to work, and they started pooling their resources and bought buildings together. And then 2017, they sold a building for $90 million. They have the biggest endowment in nonprofits in the state of Florida. That's the power. That's the power of the collectivity and community. So I'll turn that over. And the other one was Bakehouse Art Complex. Yes, sorry.
I think, Audrey, you should speak to the qualifications, the affordable housing, which is really centered around your income levels.
So in my world, when we talk about income levels and housing advocacy, there are different, this is all based on the general income that's here in Miami-Dade. So there is 30%, 80%, 60%, 80%, 120, 140% of the area median income. What the hell does that mean? So when we talk about affordable housing, generally what we're talking about as a housing advocacy organization is that 80% of the area median income and below. And that is anyone earning, a single person earning $75,000 and below. Not many people are even making that, right?
Yeah, but 80% AMI, what's the average, what's the income requirement? I think it's 35.
That's right, that's right. And so, you know, what we're seeing is that a lot of individuals, whether they're single or in family households, it's really challenging to qualify. So you can qualify for affordable housing, but there is no affordable housing. We're seeing a reduction in vouchers, a reduction in subsidies and resources available for households to access. So, you know, Lori mentioned earlier, emergency rental assistance program. Currently, you know, I know, you know, there isn't a lot of capacity in our county and within our different providers to, you know, allow access for people to access, you know, to get rental assistance or even to get voucher assistance. Because let me just tell you, let me give you some context. There's one staff person supporting thousands of residents trying to access vouchers, rental assistance, and other programs. One person at our county right now. That gives you an insight as to how challenging it is for whether you're an artist or you know sanitation worker or whatever, you know, in the workforce. It's really challenging, right? And so in accessing funds, it's nearly impossible. And so we're seeing an increase of evictions. Actually, we're seeing more evictions now than we have pre-pandemic. And why does that matter for everyone here? So as you know, Avra and Lori have mentioned, we need to think through how do we collectively pull together our resources, because no one's getting, there's not a lot of help right now, right? And so how do we co-own property together and create safe spaces and preserve what we have in our communities? And I think Avra can talk a little bit more about, you know, some of the cool things that Vagabond Group has done and is doing to create safe spaces for our workforce.
Yeah, so we did a project in Little Haiti. We did 24 units in 2 buildings, and we accessed a program in the county called the surtax. It's a subsidy where they give you like $25,000 a unit towards renovations. There's things like America Build. And then we commit to a 30-year covenant of 80% AMI or less. So, and I'd say we're probably at 60% AMI on that project. So there's a program out there through the county called surtax. So if somebody here owns a small apartment building, or you got together and you bought a small apartment building, you could access those funds. The issue that I think, and I've expressed this to the county, and it was almost a mandate. I said, listen, I'll go through the program on one condition, that you make changes to make it easier. I can tell you it got better, but not good enough. So I don't even know who else has access surtax dollars but me, because the bureaucracy alone was like, you know, shoot me, right? So, but that's available. There is funding available through the county and also to buy homes. So you can reach out. First home buyers can get funding for that. Which is, I think, a great program. So, you know, and that's something where maybe if somebody went to the county and figured that out and got a 2 or 3 bedroom, now you can include your friends, you know, and co-live together. So I'd say look for first homeowner buyers. I did the project in Overtown through a grant through the Omni CRA. The Omni CRA has been in existence for over 25 years, and they've helped fund the museum park and the port to the tunnel to Miami, but they had not done one affordable housing project for their residents. And so they called me up and I said, okay, I'll do it on one condition, that everybody that's there stays. So I have residents that have been there for over 4 decades, to family generations, and they're paying $700 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment. So that's a really good story. We also didn't do any displacement. It was 5 buildings, 1 building's empty, and we moved people. So one of the other problems with affordable housing is when developers come in and they're going to do affordable housing, they tell everybody, well, we'll bring you back when we're done. Okay, so but remember, you're displacing people from their friends, from their church, from their kids where they go to school. I mean, you can't just displace people. So how do you do affordable housing in a thoughtful way? It takes longer when you do that without displacement. We're on our 5th building. We've done 4, and we're on our last one. But I will, you know, but there's very few developers that could have done that. We're floating the job personally, $800,000. Funding it, $800,000, and working for free. So it doesn't work. Even when you get the grants and the subsidies and everything, when we're all done, you know, maybe that money will at least get our equity back so that we can go do it again, right? So every time I do something, we kind of take the same money and then we roll it into another project. It's sort of our commitment. But that's a lot of money. And the contractors, if you wait for somebody to give you a draw, you know, some of these programs will give you a draw when you've done the work. Well, if the draws take too long to get paid, the subcontractors leave. They're not going to wait 6 or 8 weeks to get paid. So there's an execution process here that has to be supported even more than that people aren't aware of, and that really the public side doesn't. The public side, in terms of their grant making and things like that, they don't really fully understand the execution side.
And
right?
I even find in our philanthropy, so there's a big philanthropic organization that granted one of our partners, Alapata CDC, monies to buy some land. And they were like, okay, let's get this money rolling. I think it was like $1 million, close to $1 million. Then they were told, actually, you can't access this money at all until you have already bought it on your own. It's like, that makes no sense. How can a small nonprofit purchase some property? And so, as Avra was saying, the money and all the incentives, all the programs, it doesn't make sense for small and emerging developers and nonprofits. And so, I think where creatives can come through is raising attention to this issue, as well as thinking innovatively about how to process everything and actually I think some of these philanthropic organizations, they'll listen more to all of you rather than Avra or myself sometimes, right? Because they're like, well, you just want the money, you don't really know what this all means, but they're not understanding that there are literally lives at stake, right? So
I saw there was a question. Yeah. Yeah, I mean and that's our commitment. And organizations could do that, or you guys could do it collectively. You really have to get together, and then, and I've made myself available on process before. People have come to me and said, "Okay, how do we do this? Where do we go?" Because listen, building a building, it's not rocket science, guys. There's a process, and again, what really holds this all back is money. So we got to figure out how we can get and I think, again, to your point, if collectively you got together and you came forward with a project in mind, it's always easier to raise. This is what we want to do. Commissioner, so the Dade Heritage Trust Project, it was Commissioner Higgins that funded that. They found the building, the Dade Heritage Trust said they would do it. They got people that would do the renovation at cost. You come forward with stuff like that, and then Commissioner Higgins gave them $1 million grant. So in order to access, I think, some of this money, you have to do a lot on your own, take a lot of initiative on your own first.
So I got a little depressed for a moment here in the conversation. I was like, damn, however, it's really hard, right? Really hard. And where does the money come from? But I want to go back to that agency that you're also talking about. When Locust was founded, it was 3 artists. They had just graduated from their MFAs. One of them had been from Miami, and they moved back, and they're like, we're here, we've arrived, we're artists. And then it was like crickets. The galleries aren't going to take them, you can't get. So they just came together, they pulled their pennies, they rented a warehouse in Wynwood. I told you this story. One of them knew how to code. Another one he was a sculptor, knew how to build anything. So they did it's all about everything we just talked about, this idea of agency. And I want to push it forward, because what happened was collectors took notice. These artists were doing something on their own. Those people who had the money took notice. And they said, you know what, we'll pay your rent this month. And then it turned into, hey, let's get you to be a nonprofit. And then it turned into, Locust is now a $1.6 million a year organization in an 8,000 square foot space. We're still rent vulnerable. I still have to work my behind off. I have my partner in crime. We were submitted a grant last night to the Miami Foundation for community grants, because we're always on the hustle for money. All the arts organizations, especially the artist-run spaces. But I want to say one of the ways you can create agency, and this was, as you were speaking, it's like, of course, what Locust does really well is we listen to artists, because we have voting artists on our board. We have artists who founded us. We remain true to the vision of our founders in many ways. And as a result, those who have money listen to the organizations who have the ear of artists. So we are successful in getting grants, and we're successful at being advocates for you. So one of the ways I think you can also take agency is get involved with your local nonprofits, because they're the ones who also have the roads. They're the ones who are providing grants. We now know some of them are providing some affordable housing. Get involved with your local arts community. Support them in any way you can. Your attendance is one of the biggest ways. Andrew and I just did a focus group with about 20 artists, and we're using the feedback from that focus group, asking artists what's essential to you, what to be able to do the work you do, what is essential. We're pulling that together to be able to present our next big grant, to say, this is what our community of artists is saying. So I just want to throw that out there as one way you really can have agency, is to just simply show up, get involved, and get to know who's in your community.
Yeah, and get organized, right, Rich? So we talked to, because the bigger the voice,
And there's
more.
public comment at every city and county meeting when there are votes coming up. When they vote on the budget for culture in September, I show up at public comment. We, as arts organizations, showed up en masse. That idea, if it had just been locust projects there, we would not have saved $1 million in our arts and culture budget at the county level, which is already very generous. But because the commissioners weren't hearing, they just weren't putting that allocation in until we showed up.
And it's key before we even get in front of these organizations is to not allow your pride to get in the way of asking for what you need. Before you go to a gigantic organization with millions of dollars asking them for a couple $100, what about your neighbor 2 doors down and you see them dragging paint in and out of the house or carrying records or whatever their medium is in and out of the house? They have something in common with you. How many of your neighbors do you know? You have any idea what your next door neighbor does for a living? Probably the same shit as you. Struggle. We struggle for a living. There's a romantic side of that that says that's why the art is so beautiful. Because without struggle, there's no good art, in theory, right? There's also a school of thought that says no good art is made in expensive rent. There's another school that says the worst injury you could ever get is a self-inflicted injury. And one of the biggest self-inflicted injuries that artists apply to themselves is sitting around their friends who have similar complaints as them and complaining with each other and never taking the problem to the place where it could be solved.
So go find a duplex out there, guys, and a fixer-upper. You guys can
Rent
fixer
your
up
garage out, your second bedroom, third
make it a
bedroom.
first home acquisition, pull it together, and if you do one, open source it. So what we do at Vagabond Group, we open source our affordable housing, so everybody can learn from what we do. So whatever you do and you're successful, share it, so that other people can follow and do what you did.
I think another thing that can also be done is what's recently been legal not in the county is accessory dwelling units. So think mother-in-law quarters at someone's house.
Does that count for tiny houses and
Yes,
backyards?
tiny
and-
homes
But
technically.
it's only on the county level.
It's only at the county level. There is an ordinance that just passed first reading at the city of Miami. I don't believe many people came forward in order to support it. So second reading is usually where the party's at. So if you look at the city of Miami agenda, I really encourage everyone to go to that to speak in favor of it.
And we should look it up now and tell everybody.
Yeah.
That's going to be really important, guys. Because everybody that has a house can take their garage and turn it into a studio apartment. Right now, they can't legally do it. People do it, but it's not legal. And it gives them an opportunity to maybe put in a tiny house in the back or something like that in their backyard. So could be a great solution to bringing affordable housing on an infill level. Like that's the other thing. You don't want to be having to take 3 or 4 buses to get to work, so all of our stuff is infill, right? So you close to transportation, close to where your friends are, things like that. So that's a really great solution for adding supply in infill locations. So everybody's got to be there.
So now that we've fed you the biggest word salad you've had all week, does anybody have any questions? Do I pick them or you pick them? Ladies first.
My understanding is just one, but Audrey could answer that. There's a lot
Can
of
a first-time home buyer apply if there's 2 of you? Can you get 2 credits was the question.
So at the county, you can only do one, but there are other first-time homeowner programs through banks, there's even, depending if you partner with someone that, works for, let's pretend, the state attorney's office. So there are specific programs for county employees or government employees as well. And so I'm not saying, get with, a county employee, but like you can. That's an option. There are other options as well. Again, like there are nonprofits in the housing space, neighborhood housing services that also provide first-time homeowner programs, and so you get like a grant here, a grant there, a low interest loan from another institution. And I think at the end of the day, I've met some people that only had to put $5,000 down to buy a home. So it is possible. Again, you just have to like identify all the different grants and loan programs that exist to access that.
Does Homes for All provide that? Do you guys have like a cheat sheet? Do you guys have that?
We are creating that. And so another thing that we are creating that we're hoping to expand in the next couple of years is an affordable housing database, specifically for people earning below, let's call it $70,000 a year. We just started that database, and it's primarily for youth and families that are exiting the shelters or transitional housing programs. But what Avra and Lori have kind of mentioned earlier, that proof of concept. We wanted to prove that there is a great need for this product, and so already we have served about 200 youth and families. I say that shows the need. And so we're hoping that we can get more funding to invest in this database so that way we can make it publicly available down the line. But yes, we are trying to create cheat sheets for first-time homeowners as well as for tenants.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big help, right? Because it takes but I would start in the county. Listen, you got ChatGPT out there now. I have no idea what they pull up. Maybe somebody can pull that up and see. But I do think if you take the initiative, there are some resources there that you can make it happen. And if you can make it happen, then you can help your friends make it happen.
Yes, sir.
So if you go on to vagabondgroupconsulting.com and you hit open source, right, Sue? Is there a button, open source? Yep. So yeah, hit on projects, and then there'll be a button there that says, or hit projects, open source under affordable housing. I don't have a very dynamic website, guys. I've gotten complaints. I just put pictures up and everything. But we open sourced it. We showed how much it costs us to build it. We're doing another one now. Actually, Sue, my assistant here, we're doing another one as we finish the next building for the Omni CRA project. So you can see how much it costs to build these things, right? So, we did it in the Omni CRA because it was an area that was zoned for duplexes. So knocking it down, you wouldn't be able to build back 8 units. It would have been cheaper to knock it down than it was to save it. The condition of these units was really, we demoed to see what was behind the walls, and I looked up and I'm like, what was holding up the second floor? I was like, yikes, right? I will tell you that we finished one building and we moved one family over into the new building, and the woman and her child, she almost lost her child to family services because they thought she wasn't giving him the asthma medicine. The minute she moved into a new apartment, no issues, right? So a lot of people, but we found when we went into these neighborhoods that a lot of the residents didn't want us fixing up the units because they knew if we fixed them up, we'd have to charge more rent. So it took a while to build trust there, and thanks to the efforts of the county and the CRA and all these things, it's a good story, right? Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for a lot of people.
From the perspective of the people who have the money, what incentivizes them to fund one project over another? How do they value the art from, say, a dollar perspective or beyond?
Yeah, I don't think.
What was the last part of the question? How do they value the art?
How do they value the art? From either a dollar perspective or beyond that?
What do you mean the art? The art. The art that they're supporting. Their artists are supporting. Yeah, so the projects we're doing right now, we're in county and things like that, it's just average medium income. It'll be the same for Alapata, right? So you're hoping artists come in, right? And that we look at our applications, and you know we keep it mixed, right? We think it's from a social perspective, it's good to have sort of a mixed, diverse group of housing. I know that the project that we're working on together with David and Coloma and the 3 Points guys and stuff like that, that would be artist specific. And so that would be an initiative that would be artist specific. And, so we're certainly allowed to do that because in this particular case, we're not taking any subsidies. So lots of times when you take subsidies, you can't discriminate one way or another. It's just average medium income, right? So we are private, so we're able to make some of those choices that other people can't. But on the whole, it's just it's an income test, basically.
Yeah, most affordable housing developments can't say that this is for this specific population. There are new developments that are doing that. Miami-Dade County Public Schools is doing a partnership with the county to build on top of two schools, Southside Elementary and Phyllis Wheatley, for teachers, right? But that was a specific program that they came up with. And so, there are possibilities to think through, like as Avra mentioned, like how do we create like artist designated spaces. Another thing, as Lori mentioned earlier, looking into other nonprofits. So there is a statewide program. There's this agency called the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. They're the state organization that provides funding to all developments that are doing affordable housing. They have this program called Florida Link that says that if a developer is going to build a building with 70 plus units, I think, if they allocate 10% of their units to affordable housing, they can partner with a nonprofit to recruit tenants, and that developer, they leave it to that nonprofit to figure out how to allocate that 10% of units. And so, so far, a lot of the nonprofits that are partnering with developers. Again, it's kind of hard to track who's using it. So I think that's another way, if you know an engineer or someone that loves data, they can like research into that, right? But with Florida Link, what's interesting there is that, nonprofits like Citrus or Citrus Family Care Network or others, they're saying, hey, I'm going to recruit foster care youth to access these 10% of units. And so, who's to say that, maybe that nonprofit could be Lori's group or others that can then say, I want to recruit artists only for these 10% of units. So I think, to your point, I think that could be another opportunity for artists designated spaces.
Yes, sir.
Great question, David. I think divide and conquer too is like, if there's a particular vote on the table, I think is what you want to really be focusing on. If there's a budget that's being voted on, that's a very core time to say, hey, you bring your group together. We represent arts and entertainment workforce, for example. And we want to ensure that you're allocating funds to this item. It's being informed. You need to know which, or make sure our cultural organizations and spaces are being fully funded so that we then get jobs and we continue to get the grants that support us. Because a lot of the arts and culture organizations around town we tend to hire artists, whether you're a musician or whether you're an author, a choreographer, a dancer, or a visual artist. If you know how to be a chief preparator, your day jobs, your gigs, the gig economy, we tend to all be hiring artists because that's also part of the ecosystem. So that's one way. The city and the commission, commissioners, you can just simply be writing your commissioners. Take an hour and just look online and just say, hey, I'm just so grateful. If they vote for something, also say thank you. That's the other thing. When they actually pass something that's important and valuable, that's another thing. It takes a little bit of time, but it goes a long way.
Are the arts organizations organized, meaning that as
Yes.
collectively? So just like I was
I'm
saying,
we're a
where's the
member
chief
of the
step?
Florida Cultural Alliance. We're a member of the Americans for the Arts. You don't have to pay to be a member for all of these, but as an organization, we pay money to be advocates and participate in advocacy as well.
Are you posting like, so for somebody like David or the people in the room, like could Locus actually post something and say, hey,
We-
here's the agenda, here's
Yeah,
what's
we
coming?
just talked about doing an advocacy page, sitting in a room with a bunch of directors of various nonprofit, Oh Miami was in the room, Miami Light Project was in the room, Howard Herring from the New World Symphony were all in the room, and none of us actually had an advocacy page on our website, which was like, it's the most basic.
Yeah, because I think like again, making the easier we can make things, the better.
Absolutely.
So like, here's a vote that's coming. Hey, David, let's spread the word, right? So I think the collective here has been a missed opportunity.
Taking some of the work out of it for you all is what we need to be doing too.
I will also say I know that you know the county and the city are like probably the primary folks that you would want to engage because that's where there's a big chunk of money that so at the county level each commissioner receives money from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So what contributes to that? It's various sources. For example, Airbnb contributes to that because, whatever. Point is, there's Affordable Housing Trust Fund that all these commissioners have access to. And they do what they want with that money. So it's a matter of how can, engaging your local commissioner and saying, hey, let's think through how do we increase affordable housing in your district. I know that you have some funding. How do we make it happen? Because for the most part, they're usually going to go with their friends, right? And so you want to make sure that you get to them before they do that. And that is not only at, yes, it's important to go when things are being voted on, but just, as Lori's mentioning, just emailing them randomly, right? Thank you. Would love to connect. And that's how you build
Come
that.
see what we're doing. We have
Exactly.
something great coming up.
Exactly. And then you build that relationship with them. And then they eventually are like, hey, I have $2 million that I don't really know what to do with. I mean, I don't know. They're probably not going to say that. But, they might say,
Think big, think big.
Yeah. What if maybe one day one commissioner comes up to you is like, I have $2 million that I'm just sitting on. Doubt that. But perhaps they could. What would you do with this money? I think it'd be a really cool idea if I could build employer-based housing. If I could build on top of this warehouse that I have, or totally renovate this warehouse that I have and create, 20 units in this warehouse, right? That's an opportunity, and some commissioners are really open to that. They're really looking for innovative solutions like modular housing, tiny homes.
That's a building department issue. We've really pushed hard on that, trying to get them to accept that modular housing because that's been a solution. That's a potential solution on cost, right?
It's also about you're taking out some tax-based money when you put too many people on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a product out there called Steel Homes. They're in Opelika. They build steel homes, prefab, and they've gotten state approval. So we're going to build a duplex using steel homes for the first time. When we're done, we'll open source it and we'll let you know. But we found that could be part of the affordable housing solution. But it took them a long time to get the hurricane approvals and all that kind of thing. Commissioner King, her daughter's actually an art student. And she has Constituents Tuesdays. So you can actually sign up and go see Commissioner King and ask her what she's doing for affordable
And then
housing.
swing over to Locust because she's on the soccer field on Northeast 2nd on 67th. And just swing over to Locust after.
Yeah,
Have coffee.
Yeah, and just go to her and just say, listen, what are you, and just ask the question, what are you doing and what's available in Little Haiti in the Overtown area? I know she cares, and she may say, well, I'm trying to solve it, and that's when you can say, okay, well, maybe why don't I get a group of people together? Let's go buy a big house, and we'll come back and we'll see you, and we'll be looking for you to help give us a grant to help fix it up or something, and then see what her reaction is. but I think it'll be favorable. I think if the more initiative we take as a community and you take as a community, I think you'll find help out there.
This has been great. Hats off to you guys for taking the incentive to come listen to such things and try to put yourself in a position to be successful. Thank you, ladies, for your fantastic insight. Thank you to Miami Community Radio, Jolene, David Sinopoli. And keep working. Beyond all of this, keep working. Keep making stuff. Stick to your guns. Stay in your grind. Nobody gives a damn at the end of the day. Stay in your grind and stay in your lane. You know the most beautiful thing about being in your own lane? There's no fucking traffic. Thank you guys.